Thank you, Richard, and I'm delighted to be here in Manchester this morning to launch my report into the deliverability of High Speed 2 by setting out, firstly, why I believe High Speed 2 has the potential to both transform the North as a whole and our nation by rebalancing our economy, providing lasting jobs and acting as a catalyst of change. But let me start by reflecting on the case for High Speed 2 and how it started. The concept of High Speed 2 was born out of years of planning and bipartisan approach, and it's essential to maintain that for this project, which will span some 4 to 5 parliaments. It was launched publicly by the nation's rail infrastructure company, Network Rail, in 2009, and this is important because Network Rail is the organisation that oversaw the completion of the West Coast upgrade, which finished in 2008, recognised in this New Lines study, which was published in 2009, that additional rail capacity for the West Coast was now essential to meet forecast growth. Without a new rail link, the existing West Coast main line would become full by the mid-2020s, and furthermore, there'd be no opportunities to increase the expected increased level of demand for rail freight. Separate to this review, in 2006, the 3 Northern Regional Development Agencies, under the umbrella of the Northern Way, established Northern Way Transport Compact to support work on transport priorities and to identify measures to support the North's economic growth. Over the next 6 years, this group, with the full support of its members, published the Transport Compact's work. One of the early wins has been the Northern Hub strategy, already underway here in Manchester. The report also concluded there was broad consensus around 2 other points. High-speed rail would be transformational for the North's economy, and the need to enhance the Trans-Pennine Corridor. The upgrade of West Coast simply revealed the true extent of the latent demand and growth nationally over the past decade, and in the future expected is averaging 5% per annum, even through the economic downturn. But if this defines the problem of High Speed 2, what does it answer? It's also clear that any solution to the nation's infrastructure must stand the test of time, in the same way that the West Coast has stood the test of time for 170 years. The Victorians, in a frenetic period of construction in the 19th century, built the National Rail Network. As the first new line railway built north of Watford in 100 years, High Speed 2 must satisfy this same criteria, not only stand the test of time, but to be the right answer. High Speed 2 needs to address 2 challenges: capacity relief, primarily Birmingham to London, and connectivity between northern cities in the north and London. Phase 1 of High Speed 2 addresses the capacity challenge. Phase 2 must address connectivity and therefore must be integrated with existing and future transport services, and also looking to maximise the value added to the local and national economy. And so the 5 key principles against which High Speed 2 must be judged by the public: stand the test of time, be the right strategic answer, be integrated with the existing and future transport services, maximise the value added to local and national economies, and be a catalyst for change, both nationally and locally. High Speed 2 is a massive and complex infrastructure project and a very substantial investment by our nation and our future, and therefore it must stand scrutiny and therefore have bipartisan support. Prime Minister, the Right Honourable David Cameron MP, speaking in mid-2010 in Yorkshire, said that our economy was heavily reliant on London and South East, and that such a narrow foundation for growth was fundamentally unstable and wasteful, and that he was determined that this should change. There could be no starker reminder of the need for the rebalancing of the economy than here in our 2 great cities of Leeds and Manchester. There isn't one FTSE 100 company based here. In the last 14 years of transport funding and planning in London, it's been within the control of a publicly elected mayor. And this has shown how transport investment has changed from being a cost centre to one that drives strategic investment and growth in that area. London's already benefited from this, both this investment that's happened to date and planned future investment of around £80 billion worth of London-centric rail investment, including the successful investment that enabled the delivery of the Olympics and the expansion of the city east to Canary Wharf. And so to the outcomes of my 8-week review of High Speed 2. My approach has been guided by the 5 principles that any change I propose should make High Speed 2 better able to stand the test of time, make it more the right strategic answer, enable it to better maximise the value for local and national economies, be more of a catalyst for change, and above all, maximise the benefit of the existing network by being properly integrated with this. In practical terms, what this means is, on Phase 2, working with Network Rail, the government, and above all, local leaders across the north as a whole, produce an integrated plan that will maximise the benefit of High Speed 2, not just north-south, but also east-west, Liverpool to Hull. It also means creating an interchange at Crewe that will not just bring about high speed and conventional rail, but also road transport benefits not just to Crewe, but also to the entire region. It also means making Old Oak Common a major interchange in North London, linking long distance and commuter services to the north and the west. And finally, it means doing Euston properly. Euston deserves better. It should rank alongside St Pancras and King's Cross and what is beginning to take shape now at London Bridge. And we all know that it doesn't. So taking those one by one, High Speed 2 has the potential to transform the north, not just individual cities, but the region as a whole. But it's only going to be this case if we think of the big picture. So far the focus has tended to be on individual places, individual stations, but we need to think broader than that. A properly coordinated HS2, not just for the existing network, but also plans for its improvement during the time that HS2 will be built. That would create the real possibility of improving journey times, not just north-south, but east-west across the Liverpool-Hull corridor. That opens the door to the north, not just becoming more attractive to business, but also escaping those pressure cooker property prices of London for businesses in the south relocating north. It's also to the north beginning to harness the full potential of the skill base, the universities, its diverse identities. Less than 0.5% of the commuters that commute into Manchester every day for work come from Leeds and vice versa. And yet these two cities are less than 40 miles apart. That's why I'm proposing that the government considers how to bring all relevant voices together, HS2, Network Rail, civic leaders across the north, a diverse, coordinated, prioritised plan. That, I believe, shouldn't take too long to devise, and as the statement of intent, I'm also asking the government to consider accelerating Phase 2 by bringing forward plans for the interchange at Crewe. Now, it's important to stress here, it's not for me to prejudge the response to the recent consultation of the line on Phase 2, but I believe the right strategic answer is this because it would allow Crewe to act as a transfer station, a concept that's familiar in the rest of Europe, but less so here. If plans were accelerated, I believe the North could benefit 6 years earlier than planned, 2027, 13 years away. This creates a possibility of improving the existing Phase 2 schedule, not just for Crewe, but also possibly for the rest of Phase 2. And I don't want to make too much of that until we've seen how quickly the plans of the North as a whole can come together and be agreed. In Phase 1, HS2 can again, in line with our principles, act as a real catalyst to change. But again, the key is political will, not just at a national, but also at a regional level. And again, the key is to recognise High Speed 2 as not just an end in itself. It has to be seen as one element in a comprehensive approach. Not many of you, I suspect, will have heard of Old Oak Common, never mind being able to place it on the map. But if we collectively make the right choices, it's destined to become not just a major interchange for the country, but also a long overdue source of regeneration. It's in that part of London's equivalent to the west as Stratford is to the east of the city. A once-in-a-generational opportunity. No one would want or should stand in the way, but to make it work, it means we need to make some tough decisions. And the same is true of Euston. Let's be honest, it's not really the nation's favourite capital station. It's getting close to its sell-by date, except unfortunately probably no one would want to buy it. In the next 10 years, Network Rail would had to have upgraded Euston in any case. So let's do it properly. Let's produce a station which connects the existing community, meets the need of high-speed 2 and the existing rail network, and makes the most of private sector investment in one of the last great development sites in central London. This is a time not just to restore the grandeur of the Euston Arch, but something that rivals St Pancras and King's Cross, something we can all be proud of. We need to have something that stands the test of time, but the same standards need to apply as well to the high-speed 1, high-speed 2 link. In terms of a cost-effective solution, this is the best. The problem is that it impacts existing passenger and freight services and the local community. It is an imperfect compromise. I recommend that the government should reconsider and consider alternates. In the short term, the train paths, I believe, could be used better to connect places such as North Wales down to Euston, and given the short distance involved between Euston and St Pancras, the impact on passengers of cancelling the link would be minimal, even when compared with cities such as Paris, where existing lines of high-speed services come into different stations. The rest of high-speed 1, I believe, is both necessary and deliverable, and I say that all too aware of the major challenges involved. These I would list as clarity about the parliamentary process, clearing the hurdles we face at Old Oak Common, getting the Crossrail connection from West Coast Main Line right, and making the right decisions at Euston. Simple truth at the heart of this, as any project, is that there's a direct connection between certainty, time and cost. The more certainty there can be about the timescale, the more possibility there is about controlling costs through economies of scale. That's why getting clarity over the duration of the parliamentary process is key. I recognise and applaud the leadership and the courage all sides have shown to get us to this point. And that's why not getting royal assent before the election, I don't believe that's a problem. But more clarity from Parliament can provide, the more we can reduce contingency and therefore the ultimate cost. Euston, Old Oak Common and the tunnelling getting out of London are the major challenges of Phase 1, challenges that I believe with the right approach can be met. That is why I and my team, after 8 weeks of exhaustive study, have concluded that Phase 1 budget is enough. We have tested the assumptions and indeed ended up with a bigger contingency figure than we started with, adjusting some of the items here and there, but we've reached the firm conclusion that the budget is enough to deliver Phase 1 in total. Phase 2 is too early to start this process to properly assess that. A starting point was the original budget for both the infrastructure, track and trains, rolling stock and split between the two phases without any contingency. We then tested each line item, and I don't expect you in the back to read that there, but you do have it in your brochures. The starting point in the original budget was both track and train. We tested each line item on Phase 1 budget. Where we thought necessary, we adjusted those accordingly. And then we added in some contingency, which, given the continued uncertainty on the project at this stage, amounts to about a third of the project. We reached our conclusion that the budget for Phase 1 is about right. Of course, the easy thing to do would have been to reduce the contingency budget, but given the uncertainty, particularly over parliamentary timetable, I believe that would have been irresponsible to do. But we felt we had to go further and compare the budget, not just with the original HS2 budget, but also with comparable projects. High Speed 1 is the most comparable. Even though the High Speed 2 route is clearly longer and it will carry more passengers per train and be faster, you can see on the chart here the budget does stand up to comparison. What about the indirect costs? These are all the central costs such as project management, consultancy and accommodation. And as you can see there, we've adjusted up the allowance for indirect costs in the original estimate up to match that of other comparable projects such as the Olympics. And finally, the sharp end. Have we allowed enough for the trains? A figure we again adjusted. The answer is yes. So the bottom line is this. The budget for phase 1 is enough, but we need to have a robust and reliable timeline. And that means above all clarity on parliamentary process, but there's also critical decisions necessary to unlock the real potential of Old Oak Common and for Crossrail. We also need to recognise both the huge potential to do Euston right and that the proposed High Speed 1-2 link needs to be rethought. In the north, we should go to Crewe earlier and think more holistically about how we maximise the potential for High Speed 2, not just north-south, but also east-west. And also that there's possibility to bring phase 2 forward by some 3 years, but the key is that the North acts and speaks as a single voice. As a country, we face a choice. On the one hand is status quo, ever-increasing pressure on transport, cost of housing, commercial property in London and the southeast, poor connectivity to and within the north. On the other hand are the strategic opportunities offered by High Speed 2 and the potential it unlocks. An incremental approach can only make marginal improvements, and often at the cost of unacceptable disruption to the existing network for decades to come. We shouldn't kid ourselves otherwise. If done right, High Speed 2 can provide an answer that stands the test of time and addresses the issue of congestion in the south and lack of connectivity in the north. The cost and impacts are issues that have to be recognised and acknowledged, and so too does the cost and impact of doing nothing. Without High Speed 2, the people in this country will continue to face the failures of our transport system on a daily basis. With it, they can begin to see a strategic answer that will deliver real benefits within the foreseeable future. And that is why I believe High Speed 2 is a project which, despite the issues it raises, is in the national interest. Thank you.